Before you go any further, this video elaborates on a scene from Kimi no Nawa, also known as Your Name, so if you haven't seen this film, then I recommend clicking off because I don't want to spoil anything for you. Even such a minor scene. Unless you don't care about spoilers, then that's cool too. Alright, so there's a scene in the beginning of the film where our heroine Mitsuha is performing an ancient Shinto ritual in which she chews on some rice and then spits it out into a little brown box and ties it up. When Makoto Shinkai was confronted about this scene, he says that the scene was his way of adding a little fetish to the film, like the feat from his other film, The Garden of Words. From a more anime trope angle, this scene can be seen as a setup for the feeling of the indirect kiss for when Taki drinks the sake near the end of the film. I was kind of intrigued by this scene when I first saw the film. Don't get me wrong, it's definitely not something that I want to try, but this made me curious about the origin of sake and I wanted to obtain some context for this scene in the film. So I took to the internet and I did a little bit of research to share with you guys. So to start off, the name of this type of sake is called KuchiKamiSake. A literal translation of this word is mouth-chewed sake. The first part of the word being kuchi, which means mouth, and the second part of the word is kamu, except it's pronounced as kami because of Japanese language rules. Kamu means to chew, and the final part of the word is sake, and this is pronounced as zake because some words are just adjusted to roll off the tongue easier. The origins of this comes from the final years of the Jomon period of Japan, which is roughly around 300 BCE, during the time when Japan began to start importing things from China. While sake is supposed to be a Japanese drink, I'm pretty sure that the idea of creating an alcoholic drink from rice was derived from a separate food source in China, although it may have been first introduced in China 4,000 something years ago, and the Japanese were the ones who really made it their own. I plan on leaving all my sources in the description for anyone curious about the information. Sake is widely known as rice wine, but the truth is that its processing is fermented, making it closer to beer than it is to wine. Before the proper technology was invented to create sake with the cleaner formula that we have today, the Japanese figured out that alcohol could be created using saliva as a catalyst enzyme to start the fermentation of sake. The rice would be cooked, then they would take chunks of rice and chew it for a while and spit it onto a big wooden vat. They would rinse and repeat this process until all the rice was chewed up. Once this is done, they would leave the chewed rice to brew for a few days. Believe me when I say that just by doing a little research on KuchiKamiSake, that there are people who have tried to recreate the process and documented their experience in the present day. Definitely the thing to note about this sake is that it's not liquefied like our modern sake, because the process of creating KuchiKamiSake was to take chunks of rice and chew it to break it down with your saliva. The ending result is actually a pasty chewable meal rather than a drink. I highly doubt that if our boy Taki found Mitsuha's sake at the shrine in a more accurate representation, then he probably wouldn't have indirectly kissed Mitsuha. So why was it that Mitsuha was performing the ritual, and why did it have to be her that made the sake and not someone like grandma? Well, besides that whole indirect kiss thing, it's because Mitsuha is a virgin. I wasn't able to find an exact date on when this started to become a thing, but once the Japanese mastered creating sake, the practice was adopted into the Shinto religion and became a part of the festivities. The KuchiKamiSake created by these women, like Mitsuha, was named Bijinshu, beautiful women's sake. Well, I'm sure that the reason that the virgins were selected to create the sake had something to do with them being pure and all. One of the reasons that I found in my research was just too good to pass up, and I think that it really embodies that old-fashioned Japanese pervy sense of humor that we've all seen in anime and manga. On an article I found on Vice.com by Jessica Thompson titled "Why Sake Used to Be Made by the Spit of Japanese Virgins," she described how she recently researched KuchiKamiSake and she stopped at a bar on her way home from work. There she met a sake otaku and the two got to talking, and when the conversation about KuchiKamiSake was brought up, she asked him about the virgins. His response was awesome. "I've been wondering, why was the chewing done by beautiful women?" He smiled coyly, took a deep breath and raised an index finger. He seemed born ready for this question. He pointed to himself and said, "Would you rather the sake be made by the mouth of an oji-san, old man," and then pointed at me, or bijin, beautiful young woman? She said that she would rather not try it at all. But personally, I would much rather try the sake of a bijin rather than oji-san. Jessica Thompson also describes that there is actually some science behind it as well. Her sake otaku friend also happens to be a scientist, and so his next response elaborated more on the taste as a reason for the virgins. "Have you ever heard of ojishu?" he asked. "It's the smell of middle and old age." He took a pen and paper out of his bag and proceeded to draw a proportional relationship graph. As people age, their microorganisms change, and these noisome elements can result in a less toothsome brew. The ojishu phenomenon has been identified by Japanese scientists as the result of increase in the concentration of the chemical compound 2-nonenal, which produces an unpleasant greasy and grassy odor in people. So there you have it. That's the reason behind Mitsuha being selected to create the chewed up sake at the start of the film. Mitsuha is a young, beautiful virgin girl who would happen to create a much better tasting sake than someone like her grandma. Also, don't forget to note that because Makoto Shinkai just had to have Taki drink the sake, the representation of the KuchiKamiSake that we saw in Your Name is not accurate because it would have been a much more pasty food rather than a drink. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this little history video on sake and the correlation it had with Your Name. Share this video out with anyone who saw the movie and would be interested in this tidbit. Have a great day and thanks for watching.